If everybody could file in and get sat down, we'll get started. I apologize, I'm 5 minutes behind. I usually try and be perfectly prompt. But some of those conversations are super valuable, and we'll have a little more time during the break so we can circle back to some of those things. Assuming not too many out there, we got most everybody in? Perfect. So I'm Travis Gray. Don't get too quiet, because then I'll get nervous. So as long as you guys chat a little bit. But I'm with the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining right here out of Price. So I've been with these guys a little over 5 years, and it's just been a great opportunity to work in an industry that not only myself, but everybody loves so much. So again, I do come from the division, and so I got a few points that I just wanted to touch on that'll be obviously directed to us and what we have been doing at the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining. And this is a little bit all over the map, but a couple of talking points. Over the last 365 days, the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining has conducted exactly 10,305 on-site inspections, that's in a 365-day year. That's a lot of inspections. These guys are out in the field a whole bunch. That's basically with 9 people. We have way more than 9 people total, but that's who's done the lion's share of those 10,000 inspections. With that, basically doing the math, obviously, that's over 1,000 on-site inspections for each person per year. So we're extremely active out in the field. The point of bringing that up, we're out there looking, we're regulating, we're doing our job, we're making sure that things are being done right. And you know, fortunately, Utah's got some of the greatest operators in the nation, in my opinion, which these operators are scattered throughout, and many of them make our job pretty easy. So it's very nice to work with good operators that we have. Something that's been a big deal with the division, the permit process. These guys should be extremely proud of themselves. Orland Wallace's group, they've got their application reviews. They're now being completed in under 50 days. And that's a big deal when you look at the nation. People trying to get stuff done, trying to go to work, trying to get a well drilled, whatever it may be. The actual precise number on that is 44 days. So not just myself, I mean, I work there, but the division should be super proud of everything that they've accomplished. So anyway, last year there was 67 million barrels of oil produced out of the state of Utah. It set a record high last year. So when you look at the numbers, we are definitely, I say we, they're the producers. They are on track to definitely meet that and likely exceed the 67 million barrels of oil. And that's gonna be, obviously we're still growing. There's lots of hurdles that they have to get the oil processed. Obviously they're working on those things, but point being, lots of production. Excuse me, Class 6 geological carbon sequestration. Richard Powell runs this whole department. He's here with us today. I'm glad Richard has traveled down. He's got a team of guys underneath him. The work that these guys have put in, nobody will ever see how much they've put into getting Class 6 off the ground. They're getting very close. I know that has been said for months. Some of you that are like, oh, we heard that last time. The process is just grueling, and these guys have not taken their nose off the grindstone to get through it. At the July 30th Board of Oil, Gas, and Mining hearing, the R644 rules were adopted. This moves the division one step closer to a complete primacy application. We anticipate a complete application this fall. So these guys are super close. And like I mentioned, Richard's here if you want a chance to talk to him during the breaks or whatever, if you have questions of some of that stuff. He's talked at a lot of these collaboratives, but he's here today. So Class 6 is gonna be a huge deal for the division. Anyway, I know most of that's kind of bragging on the things that the division has been doing, but it's well deserved from these guys. The amount of work they do is awesome. So to move forward with our agenda, we got an awesome agenda. A couple quick points and I'll move on to our speakers that are far more important than me. But hats off to CERTA. This building, we put this together a couple years ago, and Jade Powell, Jerry Gamber, Paula Ingram, everybody here at CERTA has just been amazing at helping us put this together. So thank them for the morning snack, thank them for the facility, thank them for having us. They've just put tons of work into it. Matt Morgan in the back makes all the video, audio put together. These guys work when nobody's watching, so thank you to these guys there with Department of Natural Resources. They put all the YouTube videos out, they put all that stuff together, so thanks to those guys. There's bathrooms around the corner. If you go out these doors, you can circle around and go back to those. I didn't get this officially, but I believe CERTA's operating as normal today, I imagine, right, Christine? They're normal operations up front, so respect what CERTA has going on. Just be aware that whatever their normal operations are, they have people coming in and out, work as normal up front, so let's respect what they have going on. Lunch will be served today. That's what you've been waiting to hear, so I'm honestly not sure what they have, but we'll have a lunch break. Well, it's not a break. That'll bring the meeting to a close around 11:45. So anyway, let's move forward. I think that's most everything I had to touch on. Whatever I'm missing, I apologize. But I guess the one thing I am missing, thank you for being here. I could go around the room to every individually one of you guys and say thank you for being here because it's huge and it's crucial. And the networking is really what it's about. We have the speakers that can touch on the points, but if you need action done, most of the people are here to help you take care of that, from government side to industry side. So it's just, that's the whole point of the collaboration, right? To get together and make a plan and move forward. We get stuck behind our computer and emails and phones, and sometimes it's not progressive. And sometimes getting out here in person and having a conversation with somebody is where you're gonna move mountains and get things done. So the fact that you got up and you came in here today, thanks for being here. So our first speaker today, we're gonna have a report on the John Dingell Act land exchange. We got Chris Fawcett here, Managing Director of Surface Resources at Utah School of Institutional Trust Lands Administration, and I'll turn the time over to him, so thank you.
All right, thanks, Travis. Yeah, I'm excited for the chance to come and talk a little bit about land exchanges today. So yeah, as Travis mentioned, I'm Chris Fawcett. I'm the Managing Director of our Surface Resources Business Group at SITLA. I've also got two of my colleagues here today, Andy Bedingfield and Rachel Boyack from our Energy and Minerals team. So they'll answer all the hard questions, if you have any, and then I'll take the softballs. So yeah, let's just jump right in. So first, I just want to talk a little bit about land exchanges, why we do them, how they can be beneficial both for us and for the local communities. And then I'll go into some more specifics on the Dingell exchange, including a few of the lands that we acquired in this area that might be of interest to this group here. So for our land exchange program, really what we're looking to do is to trade out of non-productive or sensitive trust lands. Most of you probably know that our mission as an agency is to maximize revenues from the school trust lands. And so we have a lot of land that's located in sensitive areas that is hard to generate revenue from, or might be within like wilderness study area, national monuments, those kinds of things. If we can trade out of those and pick up lands that have better revenue generating potential, it helps us to accomplish our mission, also helps to drive economic development in the communities where those lands exist. And so we're really looking for lands with mineral deposits, renewable energy, other development potential. And these land exchange processes also give us an opportunity to acquire lands that maybe are tough to get through normal BLM administrative processes. We can acquire lands that maybe weren't designated for disposal by the BLM or that have been withdrawn. And we can also do mineral estate conveyances. And it also gives us an opportunity to implement creative deal structures. We can acquire right-of-way corridors for project developments. We can structure deals ahead of time with industry partners to try and get lands that they need for their projects. And so we're always willing to talk about those kinds of opportunities. This slide just shows a few different examples of land exchanges we've done over the years and some of the economic development opportunities that have come because of those. A big one in this area is the Drunkard's Wash coal bed methane field. That was acquired by Sitla in a land exchange back in the late 90s. And that's been very important to this area. I'll talk about this a little bit more in a second, but we also acquired a couple of coal tracts in this most recent Dingle Act exchange that can be impactful going forward. Let's see, it's not working, there we go. So when we do land exchanges with the federal government, with the BLM, we really have two options. We can go through the regular administrative FLPMA process. It tends to be pretty cumbersome and take a long time. And so what we normally do is we pursue a legislative exchange where we have congressional action. There's a bill that's sponsored, goes through Congress, gets signed by the president. So yeah, it takes a literal act of Congress to get these things done. But it also gives us a little bit more flexibility and opportunities on how we can structure these exchanges. So the biggest benefit is that Congress can mandate the exchange to happen so that the BLM has to do it. they can't not do it. We don't have to comply with the local land use plans, so it allows us to go out and acquire lands that might not otherwise be available. We can negotiate the land package in advance. We can set defined timelines. We can have more flexibility on the appraisal process, those kinds of things that really help us to get things done. As far as the John Dingell Act, the Emery County, this started as part of the Emery County Lands Bill. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that process, probably participated in it as it was being worked on. Really, it started after the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument was designated. The threat of additional federal designations, particularly in the San Rafael Swell area, kind of loomed large. There was a lot of uncertainty over whether that was going to be the next national monument. And so Emery County at that time decided that they wanted to control their own destiny and try to establish some certainty over what those public land designations were going to look like in their county. So they brought together a group of stakeholders. Everybody had a seat at the table, or at least was offered a seat at the table. And that culminated after many years of planning and public involvement and involvement from all the stakeholders in the Emery County Lands Bill, which was introduced by then Representative Curtis and Senator Hatch in 2018. That was later incorporated into the John Dingell Act, which was a large omnibus bill, and it was passed and signed into law in March of 2019. So that bill in this area, at least, it designated new wilderness recreation areas in the San Rafael Swell and also provided for a land exchange, a Sitla BLM land exchange, where Sitla would exchange out of its lands in those new recreation and wilderness areas and acquire lands elsewhere that we could use for revenue generation. So the land exchange itself, as far as the acreage goes, the BLM lands that were transferred to trust lands, just a little over 89,000 acres in 15 counties across the state. And then trust lands that were transferred to the BLM, about 116,000 acres across 5 counties. You'll see an acreage disparity because these are value for value exchanges. We do appraisals and have to have equal values on each side. So we targeted, mining targets, industrial, residential development, renewable energy, and just, other lands that we might be able to make money off of. We really didn't start working on it until about mid-2021 because we were working on another major land exchange, and it still took about 4 years to get it completed all the way through the process with the appraisals and everything that's required. We finally closed in February of this year and conveyed title. So I won't go through this in detail, but this just kind of gives you an idea of of why it takes so long to get these done. So this is after, you know, you do all the work of getting an act of Congress done, then we start this process. And so, you know, we have to do appraisals of 200,000 acres of land, which is expensive and takes a long time. And then we have to do all the phase one environmental studies, a NEPA analysis, go through all of the notice of decision, the protest periods, and finally get to closing at the end. So it looks, you know, nice on the slide, but it's a lot of work and a lot of effort to get through that. And, you know, I really have to shout out to the BLM because they worked really hard on this exchange too. It was a priority of theirs from the beginning, and we worked really well with them on getting this done, particularly the local office here and Price. They were awesome to work with. So I'll just hit on a handful of the lands that we acquired in the exchange, just to give you kind of an idea. I'm not going to go through all of them because there were a lot. And so I'll just touch on some of the energy-related ones and then some of them in this local area. And so this land, and it's the land that's in green is what we acquired that was formerly BLM land. So this was a target in Beaver County, about 5 to 10 miles north of Milford, 2,680 acres. This is next to a bunch of existing solar energy development, and so it's got potential for that to expand on it. There's also geothermal potential in this area. And so that's out there now. We have it. It's available for leasing and for development to happen there. Here locally, well, just down the road in Castledale, we acquired about 2,300 acres. This is out kind of next to the solar farm that was recently developed there. So it could be used for further expansion of that. Or, I mean, any other opportunities that come along. We're always open to new ideas. Out by Millsite Reservoir, we picked up about 900 acres, kind of on the south side of the road there, across from the lake, that was formerly BLM land. Don't really have any plans for that at this point, but it could be used for, you know, recreational development. We'll just kind of hold on to that and see what happens. Picked up a little bit of land, kind of a stray remnant BLM parcel just north of Emery that could be used, you know, just as a sale. I think there was maybe some talk of a reservoir or something there at one point. I think that's why we picked that piece up. That's a smaller one, about 120 acres. Out towards Green River, we acquired a pretty big chunk, 5,700 acres, that's west of the town of Green River. It's got some mineral development potential, some uranium potential there. Also good industrial development potential where you've got the interstate, close access to the railroad. A big chunk of property up in Juab County that we call our Southwest Tintic area. Andy would know more about this one, but there's a pretty big known copper deposit on this property that I think we're putting that out for leasing, right? Yeah. And so, yeah, there's copper and several other minerals there. This is almost 30,000 acres. And then the first coal tract down in this area that we picked up was the Williams Draw tract. This is adjacent to the Lila Canyon mine. When this got put on the map, it was a little more promising because Lila Canyon was still operating at the time. But nevertheless, we own this coal tract now. Much easier to go through the permitting process with us than it is with the feds. And so like we like to say that the trust is forever, and we know we have a good asset here, and hopefully it'll be developed at some point. And then down Walker Flat, we acquired the Walker Flat coal tract as well. This is adjacent to the Bronco mine, and I think they're working on moving into that area at some point. We recently issued a coal lease to them on that. That'll allow this mine to keep operating for several years into the future. Up in Uintah County, we picked up some land out east of La Pointe that has some oil and gas potential that I'm not sure when we're going to lease that, but it's available. And I think this is the last one, the Temple Springs area, 5,700 acres. This is north of Hanksville, where there's a pretty decent helium prospect there that's been explored, and we hope that that's going to turn into something for us. So yeah, just a couple of closing thoughts on exchanges. They can be a valuable tool to help drive economic development in your communities, and also to protect sensitive lands, and it helps us to be able to accomplish our mission. They're hard to do. You've got to get a broad consensus across multiple interests. Anytime you're going to get something through Congress, take a lot of time, they're expensive, but we found that they're definitely worth it when we can get them done. And we need help to get them done. You know, a lot of people ask us, when's the next exchange? What's the next one going to be? And it really just kind of depends. We need to hear from industry. We need to hear from stakeholders. We need to hear from the local communities on what could help you. Like what can we acquire that's going to help you to be able to do the things that you want to do. And we're, you know, always open to hearing your ideas. And then, you know, express your support to your local leaders, and we really do have to build kind of broad coalitions to put these things together. So that's all I had. Happy to answer any questions if you have any.
I do if nobody else is gonna.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm curious, is there funding for improvements if you have a land exchange and land that you guys acquire for whatever it may be? I've been trying to think of something specific, but if you acquire a land that needs some reclamation done or needs something done with that land, is there funding for that?
It probably depends on what it's for. You know, we have some money in our budget to work on, you know, land stewardship, reclamation type issues. We also have a capital development fund that we use to help install infrastructure sometimes when we're doing a development project, but it's not a lot. Yeah.
And if anyone else had questions, please let us bring the mic around to you. So there's one in the back, so it's picked up on the video.
Yeah.
With your coal tract exchanges, sometimes before the exchanges go through, there's been a little bit of NEPA done and some reports filed but not made public.
Mm-hmm.
Do those reports go with the exchange? Like, in other words, are they in SITLA's files at this point after the exchange? And I'm thinking about the Walker tracks.
I don't think so. Andy manages our coal program. He could probably answer better, but I don't believe so.
Just to answer, no, we don't get copies of all those environmental reports. They either stay with the company that it was doing them with BLM, or are submitted to DOGM as part of their mine permit.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, thanks.
Thank you, Chris. That moves us forward. We're going to talk about regional economic update and energy sector profile. We have Henry Pernickley here with the Regional Economic at Utah Department of Workforce Services. He's out of the Salt Lake City office. We can have Henry come up and do his presentation. At the end, please, just like we did before, any questions, please, if you have questions, that's why we're here. Bring them up, discuss them. Just make sure you have the microphone. So, thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So Like he mentioned, my name is Henry Pernicoli. I'm a regional economist for the Department of Workforce Services. I'm in charge of the Eastern region, so I cover Carbon, Emery, Uinta, Daggett, Duchesne, San Juan, and Grand counties. And today I'm going to be giving a local economic update and a brief coverage of the energy sector. So in the agenda, I want to cover 3 big things over the course of this presentation. As I said, an economic update, a profile into the energy sector, concentration of the energy sector, wages, things like that. And then finally, there will be some talks later today about nuclear energy in Utah. I wanted to provide some national statistics on nuclear power in the United States just to help sort of contextualize and add some information for later presentations. So starting kind of at the national level and then going in, this is a graph showing the job growth of all states, with Utah being the red line there. You can see that the trend is pretty clear. Prior to the pandemic, Utah was one of the fastest growing states in the nation in terms of job growth, well above that 20th and 80th percentile blue band. And we maintained in the top states, but we started to move back towards the pack following the pandemic, and only until recently have we started to kind of break away in terms of job growth. So statewide, job growth, as you can see, it has slowed since the pandemic, but it is still, we're one of the fastest growing states. Inflation is a topic, as many of you have probably heard. This is a graph showing the components of inflation. This is with something called the CPI, or Consumer Price Index, which is a survey that tracks a basket of goods around the nation and looks at the prices of them to determine inflation. It's broken out by different components, so you can see in the orange there you have things like energy, food, shelter, all other items. That red line is kind of the general trend of inflation. Inflation reached sort of its peak around mid-2022. Prior to that, that was when the Federal Reserve began raising interest rates. Raising interest rates kind of is to slow down the economy or prevent inflation from ramping out of control. The Fed sets an interest rate that will then be taken by central banks or banks and other authorities to set interest rates higher than that for things like car loans or home loans, things like that. So inflation sort of spiked in mid-2022, and it started to slowly go back down. When I mean inflation nearing target, the Federal Reserve sets kind of a target interest rate of what they want, which has historically been around 2%. And while it hasn't reached that target of 2%, it's sort of sat between this band of around 2.5% and 3%. Inflation has lowered recently, with the most recent national inflation rate being around 2.7%. This is just a overview, kind of going now into the state and then specifically Carbon and Emery counties. In March of 2025, the state job growth rate was about 1%. The unemployment rate was around 3.2%. For Carbon, it was 2.8% job growth rate, 4.2% unemployment rate. Emery County saw some contraction year over year in March of 2025. This was primarily from a couple hundred jobs lost in the construction sector. And it had the same unemployment rate as Emery County, or as Carbon County, at 4.2%. Now, 3.2%, 4.2%, it's important to kind of contextualize what unemployment means. The historical long-run average unemployment rate for the state of Utah is around 4.1%. So the state as a whole, at 3.2%, this is still reflective of a tight labor market. You're still going to see maybe not being able to hire people as easily, a little bit of trouble finding employers in some areas. In Carbon and Emery County, it's around 4.2%. But this doesn't track every person that is unemployed. It's only people who have been actively looking for a job who have been unemployed within the past year. So if you're someone who's been unemployed for a year and a half looking for a job, you will not be counted in this statistic. Or if you have part-time work and you're looking for full-time work, you would not be counted in this statistic. This is a graph just showing sort of the job flows. This data comes from the Census Bureau. So as you can see, there's kind of this cyclical trend that has happened in recent years with job flows into Utah, with a lot of growth prior to the 2008 financial crisis, and then around 2015 or so, some significant growth, a lot of people coming into the state, a lot of jobs, with that slowly sort of trending back down in 2023. And job levels have remained slightly lower than this coming into 2025. This is something called JOLTS data. This is the Job Opening and Labor Turnover Survey. The Utah job market has experienced some cooling. So this tracks the openings, hires, quits, and layoffs in different localities, whether it's in the state or the nation. The important things to look at on this graph are quits and layoffs. Traditionally, it's a good thing for an economy to have a lot more quits. When someone quits their job or leaves their job, that means they're feeling more confident about the economy. They're feeling like they can find work elsewhere. Higher layoffs, it means employers are kind of pulling back. They're starting to tighten the reins and sort of prepare for, the future with some economic uncertainty. And you can see that starting in around 2022, the amount of quits and layoffs has slowly started to converge, with quits and layoffs being a lot closer to each other than they had been in the past. So it's just a kind of another indicator that the Utah labor market is somewhat cooling. Looking to Carbon and Emery County and Utah again, this is a graph of unemployment starting in around 2013 or so. You can see that high spike in the state around COVID. You may be wondering, why is Carbon and Emery County having not as severe of a spike during COVID? This is not actually reflective of the data. This is unfortunately a sort of statistical artifact of the smoothing process that this data has to go through in order to obtain these unemployment figures. The actual data is much more reflective of that green line there, with Carbon and Emery County seeing a high spike of unemployment during COVID and a gradual or sharp fall back down. You can see that Carbon and Emery County throughout this entire time span has typically had a higher unemployment rate, as is common in many rural counties throughout the state, with it slowly starting to creep up at around 2022. Looking at job growth, it's a much more interesting and varied story. Job growth in Carbon County has kind of traditionally remained below the state, with Emery County sometimes maintaining above, sometimes dropping below. It's typical to see large fluctuations in job growth rates in smaller counties with lower populations where the loss of a couple hundred or the gain of a couple hundred workers can lead to some large fluctuations. So recently, there's been a 9.1% year-over-year drop in Emery County, with a 2.8% growth in Carbon. And Carbon is actually now growing faster than the state on average. Looking to wages, it's a similar story. Wages have traditionally been lower in both Carbon and Emery County than the state of Utah, with the state of Utah's average monthly wage at about $5,800, and then in Emery County, around $4,700 and $4,300 in Carbon. It's important to note that these are averages. If someone is making $1 million a month, that would kind of skew the data a little bit. But it is still reflective of kind of the general wage trends over time. Another thing with this, going back to this inflection point of COVID and 2022, you can see that the rate and the difference between Carbon and Emery County and the state of Utah was moving kind of similar to prior to COVID. Following COVID, the state of Utah as a whole saw significantly faster wage gains, largely due to pressures from inflation and shortages of hiring. Carbon and Emery County has not necessarily kept up with the same rate of wage growth. Emery has seen faster rates of wage growth than Carbon. But this is indicative that in a high inflationary environment, this puts extra pressure on people because their wages are not growing fast enough to necessarily outpace inflation. And then I wanted to briefly touch on the commuting patterns. I think this is interesting data to track where people are coming to and going every day in terms of work. This is a US Census tool called On the Map, which just tracks job flows. The dark green line you see, that's people entering the county for work every day. The light green county is people who live in the county and work in the county. And the light green is people who are leaving the county every day to seek work. Some important caveats of this data, because of the way the data is published, this is only available in 2022, so it's not the most up-to-date, but it still paints a pretty good picture. And the location of where they are technically commuting to, it's not based on the actual work site, it's where the company or place that they work with is registered. So if you're an employee for the state of Utah, for instance, and you live in Carbon County, it would actually show up as you commuting to Salt Lake, because that's where Salt Lake is, the state of Utah government is based. Finally, I wanted to show some breakdowns of the industry profile in Carbon and Emery County. So for the 12 months ending in March of 2025, the largest gainers of employment in Carbon County were the professional and business services sector, adding about 180 jobs. Government added about 117, and manufacturing added about 79, with the largest decline in trade, transportation, and utilities. It's important to note that for government and trade, transportation, and utilities, government includes public education, so things like public school teachers would be factored into these percentages and this growth. And then trade, transportation, and utilities is a pretty broad sector. It includes things like retail trade. If you were to work at a gas station or a grocery store, all of that would be included in this kind of industry category. Looking to Emery, the largest gainers of employment were in mining and professional and business services. And as I alluded to earlier, there was about 249 jobs that were lost during construction for the 12 months ending in March. While there was a net job loss in Emery, or a net loss in jobs, it's important to look at these other two sectors that experienced growth, things like mining, professional business services. These are jobs that traditionally command higher wages. They have long-term and stable employment. So even though there was some losses in construction in Emery, seeing growth in sectors like professional and business services, mining, is a good sign of the economy. Moving away from the sort of local economic update, we are at an energy collaborative, so I wanted to talk about energy. So these are just some statistics about the energy sector, but before I talk about that, it's kind of important to contextualize what is the energy sector. Most of the economic data that we at my department uses doesn't have a specific category or definition of an energy sector. There's things like mining or utilities, but it doesn't capture necessarily everything that would be in the energy sector. The way industries are categorized is with something called the North American Industrial Classification System, or NAICS. So what this is it's a choice by our team to bundle these NAICS codes, or these codes of industries, together into what we think would be largely representative of the energy sector. This doesn't count for everything that's in the energy sector, but it captures people who are producing energy, people who are extracting energy, people in the utilities department, things like that. So there's roughly about 19,000 jobs in Utah's energy sector in 2023, with an average annual wage of $103,000 a year. This is substantially higher than the average annual wage for the state as a whole, and it experienced a average annual growth rate of around 2.9%. For context, the average annual growth rate in the state as a whole was around 2.1%, so it saw significantly faster growth. This is a graph that was put together by the Kempsey-Gardner Institute using data from the EIA, or Energy Information Administration. And this just shows Utah net power generation between 2000 and 2023. So Utah's history for the longest time had been predominantly our electricity came from coal. Starting around the early 2000s, that started to change as natural gas and renewables started to sort of eat into coal's production. But even today, fossil fuels such as coal and natural gas make up the majority of Utah's net power production. So using that sort of categorization of the energy sector that I described earlier, this is a graph that's showing in the different regions that DWS has assigned the share of wages and employment. So Castle Country, which includes Carbon and Emery County, has the highest mean between employment share in the blue and wage share in the red or pink. So what's interesting about this graph is 10% of employment in Castle Country is within the energy sector. But of that 10% employment, nearly 22% of all wages that are handed out in the region are within the energy sector. So a disproportionate amount of wages in the area are concentrated in the energy sector. This is a breakdown of lumping the energy sector into three broad categories. Extractive industries, this would include anything from oil and natural gas to coal mining. Other energy industries, which is kind of a catch-all term for ones that didn't fall into the other two. And utilities, this would be things like power production, power distribution, things like that. Showing the employment share across counties. Emery County has the highest employment share of any county in Utah at a little over 15%, followed by Rich, Millard, San Juan, Uinta, and Carbon. Now you might be wondering on this graph, Rich, Millard, San Juan, these aren't necessarily what counties that you think of when you think of energy. These counties have very small populations, so a disproportionate amount of employment is in these energy sector industries. When you look at larger counties greater than a population of around 15,000, the largest are Uinta, Carbon, and Sevier. So it's also important to contextualize this nationally and look at concentration. And one way economists do this is through something called location quotients. Simply put, location quotients, you take the ratio of employment for a given job or industry in the nation, and then you take the ratio of employment in a specific area like a county, and you divide the ratio in the county by the ratio nationally. So for example, say there was an equal share of cashiers in Emery County as there was nationwide. You divide those two numbers and you get 1. So any location quotient greater than 1 means that there's a greater concentration in the region. Any location quotient less than 1 means there's a lower concentration. Emery County's location quotient for the energy sector is 13.8, which means that you are nearly 14 times as likely to be employed in the energy sector in Emery County compared to the nation as a whole. And then for Rich, it's 9.1, 7.6. So this is just another way of contextualizing and highlighting how concentrated these energy sector jobs are in some of these rural Utah counties. And then finally, I wanted to briefly touch on nuclear power. This is just national statistics. As of 2021, the US electric summer capacity, which is a measurement used to do total electricity capacity of a certain energy source, was around 8.3%, and there were 93 operable nuclear reactors across 28 states. This is a map from the US Energy Information Administration that kind of shows the distribution of commercially available or commercially operable nuclear power plants in the United States. In terms of highest share, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Illinois all have the majority of their electricity coming from nuclear power, and it's primarily concentrated in a couple states such as South Carolina, Illinois, and Pennsylvania. And then finally, I wanted to leave on this slide, this is just the operable nuclear power capacity. The trend is pretty clear that, ending in the 90s as nuclear power production sort of ramped up, it has started to kind of plateau for the past several years with a slight decrease in 2012, but staying mostly flat over that period of time. So in conclusion, the Utah labor market is cooling, but still remains very strong. We're seeing still a growth in jobs, growth in wages, things like that. Looking at the more local level, Carbon and Emery County have some varied growth and higher levels of unemployment, but we're still seeing growth in certain sectors or industries that have high-paying, stable jobs. And then looking to the energy sector is concentrated in many rural counties, and I cannot stress its importance with high wages, its economic impact, and the general positive externalities that it has. So unless there's any questions, that's all I had time for. My team on jobs.utah.gov, we have access to a lot of different economic information. We are a resource provided to you guys, so if you ever needed any specific labor or unemployment-related economic information, feel free to reach out to me and my team. Yeah, and I'll open this floor up for any questions. Yes?
If someone doesn't work for quite a while, do they just fall off the charts, period? I mean, they're not counted as unemployed or whatever. They've stopped looking. They're just not working and don't kind of want to.
So for this measurement of unemployment calculation, yes, they would not be counted if they lapse over that year-long period of unemployment. There are different measurements or levels of unemployment. It's called like U2, for instance, not the band, that have different measurements of employment where they may be captured. But yes, in this instance, if you were laid off or quit your job a year and a half ago, you would not be counted in this unemployment statistic. So it's an important thing to understand that 4.2% is not capturing everyone in an area who doesn't have a job.
Yes, I had a question. You mentioned that Emery County had quite a bit of drop for construction jobs, and I was just interested in which construction jobs those might be. Like, are the solar farms being completed and that workforce is dropping off? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that seasonal or temporary construction jobs is definitely a part of it. I can't really go into the specifics of specific firms and how many jobs they shed over this period of time for confidentiality reasons. But there are different construction firms in different sort of industry groupings that have shed between 50 and 100 jobs over the course of this past year.
Okay, Henry, thank you for this great presentation. Back on the wages slide, there was a very distinct sawtooth feature to that. Can you explain what that
Is there a button to go back?
what that causes that?
Oh, gotcha.
And it's quite a ways back, and I'm sorry about that, but oop, go back. There you go. What are all those sawtooths?
So you mean the kind of cyclical sort of pattern
Yeah.
to wages going
Mm-hmm.
up and down over time?
Well, it looks like it's inter-year. It's like there's, yeah, well, it's like, you can see one after, looks like about 2021 and 22, whatever those peaks are in the wages. What's causing that?
That's a good question. I think I'd have to dig into the specifics of that sort of seasonal or yearly pattern of wages to give you a more complete answer, specifically at, more specifically at the county level. Yeah, there's employment trends across a year where, there are people that will work during certain seasons and, maybe garner higher wages and bring wages up and then bring wages down when they become unemployed. But looking at the county by county level, I'd have to dive into the data a little bit more to give you a complete answer. Any other questions?
Yes. Great presentation. It's super fascinating. Can you go back to that last slide about the nuclear?
The very last slide.
Yeah, about operable. Or this one. Yeah. Can you explain what operable means? Is that just the existing?
So, I mean, I am not an energy economist. I'll fully brief that, and I'm sure that there's a number of people in the room who have a better definition of operable, but I'll give my sort of basic understanding of, you may have a plant that, because of the energy needs of the plant, it's only producing 50% of the electricity that it actually could produce, because that's just what the demands are at the given time. So, say your operable capacity is 500 megawatts, but you're only producing 150 because the people that you're supplying electricity to only need 150. So this is a good way to show the total amount or the maximum amount of energy that can be produced by, in this case, the nuclear sector or nuclear power. Does that answer your question? Yes. Any other questions?
I can't read the scale. Is that megawatts?
Yeah, so it's a reference unit power in or megawatt equivalent. So at the top of the line is 102,312 megawatt equivalents. And this is for the whole nation again.
Great presentation, Henry. I just wanted to weigh in on the wage graph sawtooth question that came up earlier. I think that has to do with fourth quarter wages are oftentimes quite a bit higher due to things like end-of-year bonuses that get paid in. Full disclosure, I work with Henry, so I'm on his team, but I just wanted to comment on those. We see that across a lot of industries and counties. Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone.
That was a super great job. Thank you, Henry. There's a lot to that. That was very interesting. Well done, you guys. I kind of wanted to give a shout out to everybody tuned in on YouTube. We have, I don't know the exact number, but we air this live on YouTube, and they have lots of people that are tuned in. So thank you to everybody that's tuned in to these, that if you weren't able to be here today, you're still catching them via that live feed. So thank you. Moving forward, I would like to mention, with projects and partnerships with the Utah San Rafael Energy Lab, we have Caden Alderson with us today. Caden is currently the Research Engineering Manager at the Utah San Rafael Energy Lab, and we'll bring him up and see what he has to present.
Hi guys, my name's Caden Alderson. I'm the Research Engineering Manager down at the lab, and I gotta tell you, kind of got hosed today. It was supposed to be Jaron, our director, and he's a lot better at these things than I am, but I'll do the best job I can. So just give you a little background, we used to be called the San Rafael Energy Research Center. About 3.5 years back, they kind of started putting this idea together with a little reactor company out of Provo. They got together with the county. They ended up building this in the old building that the county owned. Sorry. So they made it into this molten salt laboratory with the molten salt company. It was kind of a political nightmare being owned by the county. So the new commissioners came in in Emery County. And decided, why are we managing this advanced research facility They said this would be better in the hands of the state. So the state purchased it in July of 2024, and ever since then, it's been a whole lot better. It really broadened the scope of what we did there, brought us in better funding. So what we do down at the lab is we do energy and research development. Previously, when we were with the county, it was kind of just molten salt research. Now we say that we support and research all types of energy development. We're also trying to develop high skill and high wage local jobs, because for people like me, I wanted to go be an engineer. I had to leave the area to go be an engineer, but I hated living in Salt Lake. I wanted to be able to come back to this area and be an engineer, but when you do that, it was kind of like you're going to the power plant or you're going to go work in Intermountain Electronics, which are both great places, but they're kind of narrow fields. So we're trying to work with USU Eastern to develop an energy engineering program there, and I'll touch on that a little bit later, and as well as grow our facility so that we can hire more local engineers and people involved in STEM fields. And then we're also trying to grow the area with economic growth with technology, maybe these reactors, maybe something else that we develop. So our research focus areas right now, not everything that we've done or plan on doing, but what we're currently doing is we're doing some graphite testing for a company out of Provo. They make graphite out of carbon dioxide, and they send their samples down. We run it through our analytical equipment that we have at the lab. Mainly mass spec to kind of tell them what's in it so they know how pure their process is. The biggest project that I'm currently working on is a DOE project where we're recycling lithium-ion batteries in conjunction with BYU, MIT, and a company called the Reaction Engineering International, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. We're doing some desalination work with a company called Altris, and then the main focus is for the center as a whole, our coal research, and we've really shifted to nuclear research lately with our latest announcement with Valor Atomics. So this coal research project that have taken place at our lab, they've all been credit to Dr. Andrew Fry at BYU. He acquired this coal furnace from the University of Utah and brought it down here. It's a 1.5 megawatt thermal coal furnace. It's supposed to be a replica of Hunter Unit 3. One of the big projects he's ran on it, and I don't want to speak too much because I wasn't directly involved, and Dr. Fry can talk a lot better about it than I can, so at lunch, if you want to ask him, he's right there. But they study the Brayton cycle. In this picture, you can see this, this big white tank. It's supercritical CO2, so rather than like what happens at the power plant when you run water, turn to steam, condense it back down, you're running CO2 in a supercritical state, so it never goes through a phase change. So he studied that, and then he also has a bunch of biomass and runs coal and wood blends and different biomasses through the furnace. The reason we do this coal research, or at least why I support it, is we want these coal plants to stick around as long as they can. We're not a nuclear place that's trying to replace nuclear with coal. We think coal's great, and we want them to both go in conjunction. The nuclear thing is kind of just, we know the end is inevitable for coal, so we're trying to get a step ahead of that and have something to replace that for when they finally shut those things down. So our battery recycling project, like I said, it's a 3-year Department of Energy funded project. We're nearing the end of the first year, so we are still in like our bench scale part of this project. Year 2 will be pilot scale, and then by the end of year 3, the goal is to have a mobile unit that'll look something like this picture of this blue thing in this rotary kiln, where we can pull it around to landfills and dumps, throw these batteries in it. It'll recycle out the black mass so we can get all the good things back out of the batteries and get rid of all the junk. So for some of the pilot scale experiments we're running right now, in the bottom right, you can see we have this anode foil. We've been thermally treating it just at different temperatures, different residence times, to get ready for batteries that we can thermally treat, which we can then take that data and give it to our project partners so that they can use it, and then we can get their batteries, put them back to our rotary kiln later in phase 2. So like I said, when we started this place, it was basically built by a molten salt reactor company. So it was really designed around the needs of a molten salt reactor company. So after it started, pretty much all of our work for the first year was just doing characterization of this company's salt. So they would send us their salt, we'd run it through our analytical equipment, we'd give them reports. Since the state took over, the scope's broadened. We're not just looking at characterization of one type of reactor for one company. We went from characterizing salt for a company to now we're planning on being the site to host 2 nuclear test reactors. The one that's really moving fast is Valor Atomics. I'm sure you've seen it in the news. We've had open houses down with them in Emery County, got the public's input, and it seems like this one's pretty legit. They've already came and drilled core samples. They had their architects out last week, so they're getting ready to break ground and start building some infrastructure to hold a nuclear reactor out at our site. This picture on the right is them with the rendering of what their building's going to look like out at our location. They call their test reactor the Ward 250. It's a 250 kilowatt reactor, and they say they're going to turn it on July 4th, 2026, which is America's 250th birthday. It's TRISO-fueled, graphite moderated, helium cooled test reactor. This other picture on here is what they call Ward 1. It's their reactor that they have in California right now. It's about the same size as the reactor that they're going to be putting in at our site. It's not a fueled reactor. They've heated it electrically. The one they're building at our site is about 1.7 times bigger than the one in that picture. If all goes well and they get the test reactor at our site and they get licensed, their production reactor will be 25 megawatts. They plan on doing what they call gigasites, where rather than go build one big reactor that powers a city, they have all these small reactors that they can link together and create as much power as needed. But they don't want to sell it to the grid. They want to build on these gigasites where they bring industry in and create power and have these big industrial parks, which is good for here because in Emery County, right next door, we have 100 acres they want to turn into an industrial park. Carbon has land here on Ridge Road that they want to turn into an industrial park. And these guys have told us that if they're going to build one reactor here, it makes the most sense to build the second one next to it. So it could be really good for the area if they build one of their gigasites here. Another reason that they chose our area is these guys really love coal. And it's kind of funny hearing that from a nuclear company, but they really love coal. They say all the areas they looked at were coal communities. Ours ended up being the best. But one thing they can do with their reactor is couple it to a coal plant and make hydrocarbons out of it. And then obviously they can produce hydrogen, power data centers, create industrial power. So Jaron asked me to fill in for this, and I didn't know till last night that this was an energy collaborative. I thought this was an economic development meeting. So these slides are kind of not really related to what we do as far as research. But something else we try to do out of the lab is a little bit of outreach and education to the local high school and junior high students. So we've went on tours and we've had them out for tours, and we've also went to the local high schools and middle schools and just done science demonstration and try to give hands-on visit. We're just trying to create more interest for STEM in the area, just to, I don't know, give kids the same type of opportunities that we had. I also said earlier that we're trying to develop an energy engineering program at USU Eastern. It's in the very early stages, but the people that we've been working with at USU Eastern seem very interested. Intermountain Electronics and Price also wants to be a part of it, and they've offered to use space and donate. And I can't really speak on them too much, but that's something that we've been a part of. One big thing we did last year is we ran what we called the Rural Utah Science Symposium. And it was basically a big science fair open to the whole state, people from rural areas. Jaron, our director, was just saying when he was going to bigger high schools in Utah, it seemed like they have a lot more opportunities than what they have in these rural areas for science and just anything STEM related. So he kind of wanted to create this, what we called RUS, to give these kids that opportunity. Originally, it was an individual contest where high school kids could enter a project on any STEM topic. We wanted to keep it really broad. The prizes were going to be scholarships to USU Eastern, and then we also had some other money that was donated that we were going to give out prizes that we were going to let our sponsors choose. And at first we didn't get a lot of interest, and we were kind of figured it was because if you already had chose which college you were going to go to, a scholarship to USU Eastern didn't do you much good. So we ended up going out and visiting, I think, 7 high schools in person. We got with the teachers, we went and did some more demonstrations for the class, told them about RUS, and we changed it to where these projects would be done by science classes as a whole from each high school. And then we ended up giving a $4,500 cash prize to the winning school, which ended up being North San Pete High School, that they could spend on classroom equipment and other science stuff. Can I play a video on here? Is there going to be audio? It's fine if not. It's just a short clip of this kid talking about the science fair. I haven't pressed play.
Team together and how to split off into separate parts and handle different things, which I think is some great job experience for the future. And we also learned so much about robotics, mechanics, and coding all in one little project. It was amazing. It was a great team building exercise, and we had a lot of fun with it.
So we've had a lot of other partnerships and companies that we've worked with, but right now these are the most current partnerships we have. As far as academic goes, BYU is definitely our biggest. I mean, Dr. Fry's been a huge part to building this research center. He's brought us tons of projects, and he's just been great to work with. Industry, obviously Valor Atomics, if they build a test reactor or site, that's our largest partnership. New Cube's another company that's wanting to build a test reactor at our site, but they're not nearly as far along as Valor is. And then it's just the government community. The Emery County Commissioners have just been nothing but supportive of us and have been absolutely great. This new commission has been supportive of us from the very beginning. The Carbon County Commissioners have been awesome as well. We've came over and met with them a few times. They've took us on tours of some of the land just to show Valor around. And then obviously we're with the state, so we deal with the legislature and stuff like that, but they've been great as well. So just looking ahead of what we're planning on doing next, we're headed into phase 2 of that battery recycling project. We're gonna be taking our bench scale work into the pilot scale and start messing around with that rotary kiln. Hopefully can make some ground with USUE and start developing these training programs and maybe the energy engineering program. This picture on your right is this is a shot of our facility and our border. That blue square is what we are planning on calling our nuclear campus. So our plan is to start developing that. So that way it's kind of isolated from everything else, but anybody that wants to come do nuclear projects, it's all licensed. It's all has the level of security that you need for a nuclear reactor. So that's our next plan, is to start upgrading our facility a little bit. I mean, you're inside and it kind of feels like it's this state-of-the-art place, and then you go outside and it feels like you got in a time traveling machine way back to the 60s. So trying to upgrade that a little bit, redo our fences, upgrade our security, and yeah, just start building the infrastructure for Valor. So I didn't put any questions because I probably can't answer any, but I'm open to hear any questions if you guys have any. Perfect. Yeah.
Caden, I was gonna tell you, if I can use your own words, if you did get hosed, you made a big mistake. You've done a great job. You might get that again, so be prepared. Anyway, that moves us to a quick snack, quick break. Let's take 15, 20 minutes at least. Huge thanks to CERTA providing the snacks today, as well as the building, like I mentioned earlier. So make sure we thank the CERTA employees, and let's take a good 20 minutes here and mingle and grab a snack. I always feel bad being the person to break up good conversation. Anybody out in the hall, if we could file in and get going again. The good news is I did get confirmation lunch will be coming later. That's a stressful part of this meeting. Let's be honest, it is, and hopefully that'll be ready to go, but it will be, all funny aside. Jumping right forward, I don't have a whole bunch to add, but let's move forward with an update from the Utah Regional Growth Association. We have the Regional Growth Director with us today, Mr. Stuart Clayson.
I'm here. Can everybody hear me?
Perfect. Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect. And can everybody see my presentation? Are we good?
Yes, yep, we're good.
All right. Well, thank you for the opportunity to participate virtually. I really would have liked to be there in person, but as a household with two young children, my wife had to go out of town for work, so I'm a single dad. So I had to do school drop off and I have to do school pickup. So I apologize for not being there in person. I also want to thank the presenters who preceded me. Lots of really good information. I think this group is very powerful in pushing out information, getting feedback, and understanding, what's going on in the at a macro level, and then how it translates down to the level of carbon in Emery County. For those in the room who are not aware of what the Utah Regional Growth Association is, we're a 501 nonprofit organization that focuses on driving private capital to underserved markets throughout Utah with a rural focus. It all kind of our organization spun out of work that started in Carbon and Emery County, around the San Rafael Energy Research Center, around incentivizing the kind of massive levels of renewable investments that have happened in Carbon and Emery County, um, as well as investments around the Carbon Airport and, working with some of our existing industrial base to, get incentives and help them figure out labor force issues. But it's all about private capital. And so the gist of what I want to talk about today is how there are new capital markets forming, on a national level, but how it's playing out in Utah, driven by this massive power generation relationship between existing supply and exponentially growing demand. So, topic overview. Um, this is a U.S. level thing that I think everyone in the room is acutely aware of. It was especially since Carbon Emery has long been first a place where coal was extracted from the earth, and now where we have still large amounts of generation in Emery County that goes onto the Western grid. So we understand power. And I think the all the above approach, which has long been the position of Utah, and I think it's kind of from a policy standpoint, I think that's kind of the middle of the road approach. And solar and wind are great, but the reality is baseload power. Um, this came from a previous Emery County commissioner, Gil Conover. He would always say there is no baseload power unless a big wheel is turning. And we've traditionally done that in the United States, through coal, power generation, and we're going to hopefully be still using that as part of our mix and blend of generation. But I think everyone in the room can recognize that the goal, talking about Valor, and the other organizations that are kind of attracting capital and trying to figure out the nuclear component with like SMRs. That's great, but the reality is in the short term, it's going to have to be nat gas. So, but this demand is being driven by, everyone talks about the data centers and AI. When I sit in meetings and people people talk about that, my statement is pretty simple. I said that's well and good, but there's no AI if we don't have power for it. But that's also, kind of falling in line with a growing just general industrial demands above and beyond the data centers, and then kind of the overall move towards electrification, not just with cars, but in housing. Houses have moved towards having more electric demand for water heaters, stoves, and then in an industrial complex, you're seeing a more demand. So this is driving a record-breaking surge in demand, for peak loads, and it's really creating a pressure for increased investment on generation and grid infrastructure. As I said earlier in the topic overview, the key drivers, the conventional wisdom of those key drivers is data centers. Everybody hears about data centers, um, and they've always been around, but the kind of the new unfathomable power demands for these hyperscalers that are trying to, build the AI compute power that we see as the kind of the forefront of where the economy is going. It's really difficult to wrap your brain around. It's just enormous. And as I said earlier, there's also a kind of a resurgence of domestic manufacturing. I think post COVID that was driven because what we found out is having a just in time global supply chain is well and good until it completely gets disrupted, by a global pandemic. So what you're seeing, even here in Utah, you're seeing manufacturers create redundancies in their supply chain and recognizing that we need domestic production across not just, kind of not just like high advanced manufacturing, but even on consumer goods. Um, so companies like Procter and Gamble and Hinkle have been driving investment, and then what's happening in those new industrial environments because of the um, labor force lack of labor force is they're aggressively moving towards automatization, and that creates even more electric demand on the grid. And then lastly, as I mentioned in the topic overview, there's been a push, right, wrong, or indifferent, towards electrification on personal transportation, but also on kind of large scale transportation in supply chain, whether it's in intermodal and transload facilities, kind of not using diesel switching gear, but kind of trying to electrify all those environments. All those things coupled together just put this massive, kind of demand on the grid. Um, so what are those impacts? Um, the hopefully everybody can see the little chart I pulled on the right. That is pulled from an article that was primarily based on a report put out in Q2 of this year by the National Electric Manufacturing Association, so NEMA. And NEMA represents the manufacturers who make all the things that go into power generation and power transmission. And if you kind of look, there's the historical graph of the growth of power demand kind of up until 20 up until recently, and what they're projecting out. NEMA's kind of middle of the way. McKinsey is a big management consultancy, and but the NEMA's between where EIA and McKinsey is, but based on NEMA, they're projecting annually there's going to be just a 2% growth in demand of electricity, and that means we have a 50% growth by 2050. Um, some estimates are vastly larger than that, but even if you look at that, that's a pretty aggressive number trying to wrap your brain around. And it's not just going to require an investment in generation, but I think everyone in this room is aware that that also requires upgrades and investments on existing grid infrastructure. Um, so those capacity needs, that we require money to reach those capacity needs in Utah, in the West, and throughout the lower 48. The problem with where we sit today is presently the business and regulatory structures that we have across the country to manage and deliver for existing load demand and new load demand growth. It all starts with FERC on the federal level. And then you have public service commissions on every state level, and then you have the regulated utilities. And just quite frankly, the regulated utilities are they're not the type of organizations who can move at a quick and fast pace. They're methodical and slow, and they like to make sure they have their rate increases to cover, their projected costs. And that's kind of not where we need to be as a market. So you then put that into the context of Utah. Um, and last year, in October of last year, Governor Cox announced Operation Gigawatt, which our hosts from DNR are probably aware of that because that program exists within there. I think the overall intent is to, from a policy standpoint, is how do we deliver a gigawatt of power. And the four kind of pillars of what they're talking about is, increasing transmission, expanding and developing more production, enhancing policies for nuclear and geothermal. And to that end, the picture that we have here is of a geothermal project that's been ongoing in Beaver County, a company called Fervo. Um, and then investing in innovation and research. And I commend the governor's office for kind of calling out this initiative, and it's good to raise it top of mind. Um, I think I think a gigawatt is probably a little conservative of what's needed. Um, it it's come out that before let this year's general legislative session, Rocky Mountain Power, I mean, they were telling people who are putting in applications for new load that they didn't have even transmission capacity from Provo to Box Elder to transmit 5 megs of power. And so I'm glad we're bringing it top of mind. The thing that happened in the 2025 general session um, is SB 132, Senate Bill 132 was passed. Um, it I think it had 5 versions. So there was a lot of back and forth. Um, Rocky Mountain Power was, heavily involved. The Manufacturing Association was heavily involved. Um, there was the effort to protect the existing ratepayer, which I commend our legislator for doing that. For those in the room who know me, I moved here from Louisiana. And what the Louisiana Public Service Commission did for Meta, because Meta is going to build a big, giant data center down in Louisiana, they're going to put the cost of all new generation and transmission on the ratepayer. And I'm glad we live in a state where we don't need to increase rates, for large scale users. We've got to figure out a path for them to pay for that. And to that end, the really exciting thing that was captured in 132, which had never been done before, is there is a pathway for large demand users to figure out self generation. So the legislature was referring to it as what they called the walled garden. So if a individual or group of individuals can create a pathway to build a minimum of 100 megs over a 6-year period, they can build that generation and non-utility generation providers, a provider who's not, utility could be identified to deliver that generation, to enter into private contracts, PPAs with the users, and you have a pathway today, to build generation at the speed of business, not at the speed of regulators and utilities. Um, and there are a handful of projects that are um, in some level of development across the state that it's utilizing this. And I think that's a really exciting thing. And going back to previous presenters, talking about most of that all that generation that's being contemplated and planned is going to be it's going to be based on natural gas. But as I see it, where you have that going, that's going to be a natural place where when the SMR technology actually gets to a place where it's commercial ready, you can either replace or add on to existing generation in these areas where you've built, a cluster of users, and you can expand it. And the way something like this works with a Valor, is, as I understand Valor's model, before this legislation, there was no way they would be able to do what their full vision is, but now they can, with SB 132. So to that end, um, going back to why this is exciting for UTRGA, is this is a new pathway for private capital formation to come together and find a project in a Carbon and Emery County or an Iron County or a Beaver County, or some of these tertiary or fully rural markets, and can build generation and bring users that can that utilize that generation, and we can grow. And then going back to the transmission component, we can get to what really makes a lot of sense. We should be putting large scale users as close to generation as we possibly can. Um, and so that is an exciting opportunity for a place like Carbon and Emery County. And it's very exciting for the Utah Regional Growth Association to be involved in conversations and hopefully driving that private investment to the right kinds of communities. So to that end, I'm going to say thank you, and I'm I'm going to stop presenting. Am I still on the call?
Yes, just one moment. We have one question for you.
So, over the past couple of months, I guess past year, there seems to be a huge race to get these data centers in place. And so, because of the massive race, natural gas seems to be the thing to do due to the scalability and just the availability. Do you think as these data centers are put in place, that kind of rush will decline the need for natural gas at all?
Decline or increase?
Decline, or I don't know what I was trying to say
Decline.
there. Decline the need for natural gas, but also increase the power.
Well, I mean, we have an abundance of natural gas across the U.S. And in Utah, we have an abundance of natural gas. In I grew up in the oil patch. So I grew up in North Louisiana in the oil patch, and I always tell people, oil and gas is one of the most innovative, forward-thinking industries I've ever seen. And it's not driven by a love of the environment or even a love of protecting humans. But the reason, like, companies like ExxonMobil and Chevron have some of the best health and safety requirements of any company in the world is because when employees go down, there's a cost associated with that. And so, as it pertains to nat gas, what you've already seen, if you go to West Texas or any land-based kind of oil field development, instead of flaring off, they've been dropping gas generators on site to create their own power for a really long time. So Do I see a decrease in demand? No, I actually think an increase of demand is what we're going to see. Not that, to give the preface, I'm not an energy economist, but this is just kind of what I think just kind of makes sense. You're going to see an increase in demand, an increase in utilization of a resource that we have, uh, arguably. I mean, it's not infinite, but it's pretty substantial. I mean, the in Lake Charles, the LNG port that we're exporting LNG out of was originally constructed as an import facility. And then you had the Haynesville Shale discovered, you had the stuff in North Dakota, and we're pushing. Lake Charles is exporting natural gas. We are a net exporter of oil and gas because of our just massive abundance. So what I see is going to happen is you're going to have industrial development, and it's going, I see this because it's happening real time, where there is a nexus to available nat gas on a pipeline combined with some, you know, level of connectivity to transmission, and you have available, you can lock down 800 to 1200 acres, you'll see gas generation start, um, and building and bringing in users that'll take that demand. Now, will it be data centers? Um, and I hope I don't offend people in the room, but as I see the data center kind of race right now, they're like the hot girl at the dance. Everybody wants to go get a data center because they are massive. I think for Utah, I think a better play for us is to just stay steady and straight down the middle, whether it's in a Carbon and Emery County or even if it's in the Wasatch Front, is let's go get just regular industrial users that need 5 megs of power that presently can't get it. And let's build that use case because it's long term better for our economy. Are we going to get some data centers? Absolutely. Um, but they also create the data centers, and that alone they create grid problems. Because if you talk to the utility, if you talk to RMP, they'll tell you, yeah, they want to say, you know, a Meta, Facebook, or whatever will be like, oh, we need 400 megs of power, but they're only using 200, but they want the redundancy as a just in case. But they're only paying RMP for the for the for the watts they're using, not for what they have locked down as availability on the grid. So that's a loss for RMP. Um, but I mean, back to your original question, I think us having natural gas, us having things like the Kern River pipeline, kind of running down to Millard, or even in Carbon and Emery, where there is, you know, large amounts of gas deposits, I think it creates a very interesting play. Um, so that's how I would answer that question. God, I goes. Oh, there's another one. Good.
My question is about Emery County and a proposed data center down near the town of Moore. And there's been a lot of solar development down there in that area. And I'm wondering if this is one of the clusters, private clusters of energy development that you're speaking of, and if you have any information on that.
Um, I am not aware of a proposed data center in Emery County. I'd be very interested to learn more. I My take on the mass, and more in Emery County than Carbon, the massive amount of solar that has been entitled and is being developed. Um, I think it has been a good capital investment play for Emery County because those developers get a 30% federal tax credit, for both the generation of the panels and then the planned battery storage. Um, Data centers, if they are, certain companies like to show on their investors that they have a, you know, some level of generation from renewables. But at the end of the day, like, if a data center goes down, it their cost of going down is millions of dollars a second. So they want reliable, redundant power. And going back to what I learned from Gil Conover, if a big wheel ain't turning, you don't have base load power. So I actually think what would be more attractive is the existing coal generation that you have and the ability to deliver more generation so that they've got baseload power. Will they want to tie in to those solar plants? Absolutely. But the reality is those solar developers have already negotiated long-term purchase agreements with Rocky Mountain Power to deliver those projects. So I don't think they're going to be able to tie directly in. If they want to utilize that solar, they're going to have to go to RMP and buy it. And RMP's going to make that a part of their larger blend of renewables that they've built throughout their entire network. But I think I will tell you this, going back to your question about data centers, Emery County is a perfect place, in my opinion. I'm not some expert data center developer, but I've spent a lot of time and I've gotten to know those people. Emery County has large swaths of available, affordable land. There's available water, and there is baseload power generation um, with those coal-fired power plants, and there is nat gas throughout that whole area. It, it would be a perfect fit for Emery County and a really good replacement in the lost property tax revenue that the county has been dealing with as the power plants have slowly been devalued because 60% of Emery County's property tax base is centrally assessed, and as the value of those power plants go down, the burden of the property tax goes to every Emery County resident. And if you get a large scale data center, which is, these projects are billions of dollars, and you put that level of property value, commercial property value on the Emery County tax roll, that lessens the burden for your Emery County residents and your Emery County businesses that have been bearing an ever growing burden of the property tax because of the devaluation or because of the depreciation of the power plants. And lastly, they're not big employers. And I mean, I don't want, I feel like if someone is living in Emery County, there's a lifestyle component. I mean, Senator Hinkins makes it always real clear, we don't want a bunch of people moving into Emery County, which I fully respect. So you don't want some massive employer who's going to employ thousands of people. I mean, you want stable employment and you want good household income, but data centers are not, once the construction jobs are done and those people move on, which is temporary employment, then I mean they don't require a lot of employees. They require highly skilled employees and highly trained employees, but you're talking about, like, on a large scale hyperscale project, less than 100 employees. Now they're making above that $100,000 a year wage that our presenter from Workforce Services made, which is good for the community, but it doesn't put extra burden of a large amount of permanent residents who are coming in, driving up housing costs, driving up demand for new housing development, putting burdens on the school district that's not prepared to receive those. So data centers are in my opinion, they're a perfect play for Emery County. All right. Thank you, everyone, for giving me the chance to present, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Great job. Well put together. They got so far today we've discussed primarily where we're at today with a lot of things. We've really been looking at the past up until now. Where we're at today with production, we started on that. I talked about that a little bit. Where we're at today with wages in comparison, and kind of where we're at today with land exchange. A lot of that has been the topic of today. So now with our next presentation, it takes a look forward into the future, and specifically the future of nuclear development here in southeastern Utah. I introduce to you the director of the Utah Advanced Nuclear and Energy Institute, Jeremy Pearson.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you. Do you want to turn your camera on?
And my apologies, I'm just returning from the board meeting. I'll turn it on in about 2 minutes.
That's okay.
So-
And then, Jeremy, do you want me to run your presentation from the room in here, or do you want to share your screen from where you are?
Okay, so I'm prepared to share it. So let me click on that right now and see if that works for you.
That sounds great. We see it.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I'm really excited to be with you guys today. As I have in previous Energy Collaborative meetings, I think these have been so productive and so wonderful to see everything that's going on. My apologies, we had a conflict with our Utah Energy Research Board, which oversees the Institute and the lab, and had two really important projects just approved, which include the Valor project that Caden presented to you just a second ago. So otherwise, would totally love to be with you in person. So I'm just gonna catch my breath and step into the office here. Okay, great. So let me turn on my camera here. I'm so glad to be with you all. So mentioned the future of nuclear energy and what could be brought to Emery County and to Carbon County. The Institute, there's also, we missed the presentation by Dusty today, which he'll be able to speak a lot to a lot of the utility efforts that will be ongoing in the state. And the Institute is more directed at research, bringing the universities together with Idaho National Lab to do research, but applied research that's intended to accelerate commercialization of nuclear and other energy technologies. I appreciated Stuart's comments there. I caught the tail end where he talked about the great impact that natural gas and other energies have had on our country. And so there's a hope that some of these projects that come through under the Institute get directed to the San Rafael Lab. So I think the state legislature saw an opportunity to grow on the success of the lab. But some of these projects could also go to some of the universities and other locations in Utah. So as I mentioned, this grew on the success of the lab. The legislature saw the opportunity to tie our relations a little deeper with Idaho National Lab and our universities. And so the outline that presents what the Institute would be doing was a part of an appendix that was included in an MOU that was signed with Idaho National Lab to work together. The actual authorization in HB 249 for the Institute was just one line. So the details I'll be sharing right now are from the appendix in that MOU. And if anyone's super interested, I could share that with you as well. And I might rush through these a little bit so I don't take too much time and can field questions. But here we go. So first and foremost, this appendix has a mission statement, which I think we can go ahead and adopt because I really like what it says. So this Advanced Nuclear and Energy Institute mission is to support Cross University and Battelle Energy Alliance, Idaho National Lab collaboration to elevate and advance needed research and bring relevant nuclear energy technologies to market. And that it also outlines the director's responsibilities, which are to coordinate the universities and put together an advisory board that informs the most important energy research topics, which could include nuclear, geothermal, fossil fuels, all of the above. And in general, the MOU bringing Idaho and National Lab closer with Utah expects accelerated development of next generation nuclear technologies and enhance the scientific research to bring those forth and to focus on cybersecurity, physical security, and as well as workforce development. The few articles that came out about the Institute when the MOU with INL was signed, right about the time that Governor Cox had his Energy Week, April 29th this year, I think, his Energy Summit. Some great comments. Cox mentioned a formal long-term collaboration on advanced energy research, workforce development, and technology deployment. Mentioned this is a key coordinating hub for the next generation of nuclear, and I have underlined there in the bottom that again this is intended to take the universities and to not just have them getting grants here and there on something that may or may not result in commercial effort, and bring the universities together on large projects that you can term applied innovation. So they will really help stimulate the commercialization of nuclear, geothermal, and other technologies. And so with these larger projects, there's a really big probability that they could end up at the San Rafael Energy Lab. But ultimately, with a hope to then commercialize these technologies and then have those industries be located in Utah as well. And so Stuart Adams and Speaker Schultz, some quotes with their support and ideas on the Institute. And just in terms of metrics, the Institute was given a seed fund of $2 million to use as matching funds towards these grants with the universities and Idaho National Lab. And we've committed to double that over 2 years. So that's our first benchmark, and if we're successful there, then we'll move on to seeking additional funding to continue and grow the Institute. And I haven't asked, but I'm assuming everyone can still hear me, and the slides are moving forward okay.
Yes, yep. Everything is going well.
Great. Okay. And so now that I paused too, I can just ask is there any questions at this point?
Don't see any.
Okay, wonderful. All right, I'll move forward. And then there's various people that the Institute will report to. And again, we'll have this advisory board. This is the makeup, which will help advise us on what projects the Institute and universities in Utah should be focused around. And then you'll see here, especially in addition to Idaho National Lab, we have the institutions of higher education. So we'll have the professors telling us what they think they're experts at and what we should research. And so, of course, at the lab, already when I was down at the lab, already became really familiar with a lot of the work that's going on at BYU, University of Utah, and USU in the nuclear space. And so I've formulated my thoughts too on where I think our strengths lie. And so I'll move to present that to you in just a second here. This slide was just some of the professors that we have been working with at the universities and expect that to grow, especially with Utah State University's Energy Engineering program. We've been working with them to help give them ideas on what are the right research areas and expertise they should be hiring into that program. A lot of this work is going to be in the technician and trades areas, especially in support of work going on at Intermountain Electronic. And we had some really exciting initial meetings between Valor and Bobby at IE, where some strong connections were made on how to synergistically move forward their products. So those kind of things are going to be incorporated into the energy engineering program, and then result in grant applications and growth that the institute can support. And so here's just a diagram of what the institute looks like. It's this governing board that's over the institute is the Utah Energy Research Board, which oversees the San Rafael Lab and this newly created institute. With me serving as the director of the institute, the advisory board with the makeup, giving advice on what energy topics to research, and then the research liaisons at the individual universities that help inform and go after projects. So now I'll just share with you some of the strengths we've seen at the university level and we're already working on at the San Rafael Energy Lab. And before jumping into that, I just want to share this quote. I selected Bill Gates here, but this has been said by multiple people across the political spectrum, that if you want to really have a why and a motive for why we're bringing forth and advancing energy, it's to elevate humanity and especially reduce poverty around the world. And the fastest way you can do that is by lowering energy prices. So when we try to work with the universities and with Idaho National Lab, determine what to go after in terms of research and energy, first and foremost in my mind is we need to be focusing on ideas that increase access to and reduce the cost of all energies. And so I put together this figure that in my mind shows if we want to bring forth nuclear energy, what are the things that are holding it back? And first and foremost, in my mind, is lowering the cost. I often find from nuclear to all energy sectors, it's said that gosh, if natural gas and oil prices just went up, then my technology could have a stronger market. And I don't think that statements like that understand the impact that will have on economy and the more global perspective we should look at it at reducing costs. So in other words, I think for nuclear reactors to truly serve and to compete, they should actually achieve and then come in at a cost lower than natural gas, rather than hoping that natural gas prices go up. So those are the things we can research. We can research reactor technologies, enrichment technologies that reduce costs on the fuel, manufacturing technologies with assembly lines, with small modular reactors. And the reactor that in the end may be the most cost effective and versatile reactor, we believe to be, while we support all the reactors and we're really excited about all of them, but the molten salt reactor may be a game changer. And so I'll just flip to this side. It's actually in our state energy policy and was reaffirmed in the state energy policy amendments passed by HB 374 by Colin and Evan Vickers, that you can see here on B, the molten salt reactors and isotope recovery is a stated goal, in addition to the standard fossil fuels, unconventional fuels, solar and wind renewables, and hydrogen and energy storage and such. So the unique thing about molten salt reactors, I have a little diagram here, is not only do you have the reactor core here where you extract heat to create electricity, it's really versatile for extracting heat to run industry. And then since the fuel is molten, you can cycle the fuel out and extract the medical isotopes real time without shutting down the reactor and all the other isotopes of value. And there happens to be multiple isotopes that can be used for these long-lasting batteries that can run for 10 to 20 years in space. And they already are on Mars and other locations, and the government, including Department of Defense, is looking to put them in satellites. And so you can imagine a reactor that reduces costs by not only producing electricity, but producing these valuable isotopes, which some companies are calculating can have the same value as the electricity itself. So really enhancing the economics of a reactor through molten salt designs and turning what was once viewed as waste, the spent nuclear fuel, into a very critical asset. And so the the strategic partnerships we have with Nusano and Curio, who are the national leaders right now in recycling, and the two grants we applied to, I think are going to be really relevant moving forward to the efforts of the Institute. So that's why back here in the pillar, I put solving the nuclear waste problem through recycling and extracting valuable isotopes, expansion of nuclear energy into new areas, nuclear heat for integrated energy systems, nuclear for data centers. These two here and the advanced reactors, low cost molten salt, I think are the pillars that I'd really like to see our institute focus on in collaboration with the universities and Idaho National Lab. And so here's just a summary. You saw a little bit from Caden, but the projects that are ongoing at the San Rafael, or at least in process. We submitted a $40 million grant with Nusano for their process to enrich uranium, which could be a game-changing process that can also separate out valuable isotopes from used fuel. We're also working with Curio on their recycling process that can actually feed material into Nusano. So very synergistic. Have listed right here in the middle. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but these are a list of companies that make these long-lasting batteries out of high-energy radioisotopes, and then a list of professors that are already working in this space in Utah. Andrew Fry has done superb work with power cycle research, and we can continue to pursue and advance that work with grants and support that under the Institute. We have strong connections with Idaho National Lab's Integrated Energy Systems Department and professors at the universities that work in that area as well. We hope to support geothermal research too, because of the ongoing efforts in the state. We do have some partnerships exploring hydrogen and synthetic fuels, which are a little more expensive, but can one day be developed to be replacements for fossil fuels as they run out over decades and century to come. So it's good to start working on those solutions. And then of course the test reactors. You heard Caden speak to Valara and NuCube, and we just approved moving forward the next steps in our board meeting today with a molten salt reactor company that has received significant funding in Texas and is, as we understand it, leading all the molten salt reactor designs in the country right now. And they have interest in putting a test reactor at the lab and utilizing the facilities. So really excited about that development. And so then we can have ideas on what to go after, but we're also constrained by what grant opportunities are available. So email me anytime if you see a grant you think the universities and we should be going after, and we could take it into consideration. So, oh yeah, and then I don't have many details here, but the Idaho National Lab has put forth 3 initial proposals, Beehive, Pioneer, and Critical Minerals proposals that focus on nuclear data center coupling and working out those kinks so that they can be commercialized and advancing the critical minerals field. So with that, would love to answer any questions you have.
All right.
Hi, Jeremy. This is Brad Watson from Utah State University Eastern. We appreciate so much the work you're doing at the Energy Research Center. We're glad to have lots of changes. The mic went out and came back on. You've gone through lots of changes, and we very much appreciate your work. In the past, you've described the San Rafael Energy Research Center as energy agnostic. You're willing to research any type of energy. In your presentation today, you really are leaning more towards nuclear. Is it still energy agnostic, or is it more nuclear from what you've talked about? Give us a sense of that, please.
Thanks so much, Brad, for that question. I appreciate you bringing it up. The institute itself is called the Advanced Nuclear and Energy Institute, and that was, as I understand it, intentional to show that we're not just focusing on nuclear. So in my presentation, in conversations, you'll hear nuclear mentioned a lot, but but it is definitely comprehensive and agnostic, and that's why kind of why I included that slide with that quote by Bill Gates. Is that in my mind, I'm not doing. I don't think the desire is to focus on nuclear for nuclear's sake. The overarching why and goal is to provide energy and to provide it at low cost. And I think that aligns with Utah's objectives and stated policy too. So even fossil fuel research, I think natural gas is cheap, but you can make it cheaper. When I was in Senator Hatch's office, a company came in and said, "I got a method to double frack an old well and get even cheaper natural gas." I think those should absolutely be pursued. So so all of the above, including fossil fuels, but then also in the back of my mind, there is an I think fossil fuels will be around for another 50 to 100 years, and we could even go to 200 if we wanted. And so, but at some point they're going to run out, and at that transition point, it's going to be very painful if we don't prepare. And how long will it take to prepare? At least a few decades, maybe more. And so, I also, while they may not be the most economic solutions, I'm also very interested in the lab and the institute supporting research areas like hydrogen and nuclear renewable aspects that may be expensive in the beginning, but their prices will drop over time. And so that the value of working on those isn't lost. So one company that we do have an active project with at the lab is a company, Searstone from Provo, that makes synthetic carbon products from carbon dioxide from the air with a reactor. It's a $16 million project that's starting this year. And their carbon that comes out isn't going to be the cheapest graphite by far in the beginning, but it's going to start developing a process, and they're going to start putting their graphite into batteries, and they have a good year with carbon black for even tires they're going to toy around with, and then that very pure graphite is also very valuable as a moderator in nuclear reactors and the TRISO fuel that Valor will be using. So more expensive option, but very important. Sorry, that was long-winded, but I get excited about that question.
Any more
I
questions?
wish I could be there with you guys. I'm going to make an extra effort to come next time.
Here, we got one here.
Jeremy, I was just wondering, do you have more people than you on your team? You have a lot of lofty goals and a lot of things that you're planning on doing. Who's helping you with all of this?
Good question too. Right now, it's just me. This is brand new. I just started this role a couple months ago, and but the expectation is for this to be an institute that's has multiple staff working together with the universities and perhaps even its own independent location at one of the universities or somewhere else. So, but at the moment, I'm in the Office of Energy Development office in Salt Lake, and it's just me. But I should add, many of you know Dr. Laura Nelson, who is our former director of Office of Energy Development a few years ago. She's Idaho National Lab's representative to coordinate with Utah on the institute. And so while in Utah it's just me, we already have someone that helped originate this and is committed and actively involved from Idaho National Lab, who's Laura Nelson. And then, of course, the professors we've been working with. So in terms of staff at the institute, it's just me, but there already are a lot of hands on deck, but with anticipation to grow.
All right. Any last questions? Okay. Don't see any questions.
Thank you very much.
At all, but I would be a huge mistake on my part if I didn't thank some people for being here. Behind the scenes, so much is done. I mentioned it earlier, Matt Morgan and Seth Majors in the back. Seriously, let's give these two a round of applause. The work those those guys do with video and audio to tell our story and present it on a bigger scale than right here in this room is immeasurable. So big thanks to those guys. Bart Kettle with the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining has a huge role in this. I will never let him get away without a big thank you to Bart. The amount of time that he puts into these here, as well as the Uinta Basin Collaborative, again, is immeasurable as well. So big thanks to Bart. Along with Bart, Jade Powell, Jerry Gamber, and Paula Ingram here at the CERTA building. These guys, we have meetings to set these up. We have several core group meetings, and these names that I've mentioned, along with Representative Watkins, who is here today, sits in these meetings and puts a lot of time and energy into these. So big thank you to those guys. Yes, I agree. Thank you. And I would not go without mentioning the commissioners. Commissioner Larry Jensen was here this morning. I think he had to step out, and I was excited to see Jared Haddock join us in the back of the room. He'll be here today. So while we have lunch, take the opportunity to mingle with these people and ask those important questions that you guys have for the one-on-one conversations. So thank you. And with the next one, when you get the invite, please, if you know anybody that needs to be to this meeting, talk to them, send them that email invite. So thank you for being here. Lunch is ready outside. Thank you, thank you.